Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the USDA FSA Supplemental Relief webinar. We're happy to be with you all this morning. My name is Jamie White. I'm serving as your Acting Deputy Administrator for Farm Programs here at FSA. I have the tremendous honor and privilege of lifting up and supporting farm programs and conservation programs for our farmers, ranchers, and growers across the United States. We're very happy to be with you all this morning. We're in the exciting final phase rollout of the final wave of supplemental relief that was authorized by the American Relief Act 2025. These are critical and important initiatives in support of our farmers, ranchers, and growers, and we are excited to be in the deployment phase. We have a very full agenda today, so we're going to try to keep opening comments very brief. However, I would like to flag a few items from the logistical perspective to ensure that our attendees are aware of the status of our meeting and other follow-up items. Again, all lines are muted for the duration of this call. The call will be recorded and will be available at a later date, posted to our FSA landing page. Additionally, we will monitor Q&As that come in from folks on the line today. So if you have questions, we'll be happy to review and answer those throughout the duration of the meeting today, but please use the Q&A option available in the meeting chat to submit those questions. If we're not able to get through all of the questions and provide answers during this session, we will capture those and we will document those in writing as well to ensure that they are available on the FSA Supplemental Relief webpage after today's call. That webpage will be dropped in the meeting chat to ensure that you all have that information readily available and to access important information and updates at your fingertips. It's my honor to introduce our administrator, Mr. Bill Beam. I'd like to turn the floor over to him for opening comments before we walk through the program agenda today. Bill, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Okay, well, thank you, Jamie, and thank you, everybody, for taking time to join us today. I know I've seen many of you last week when we initially made the announcement about SDRP 2, but I felt like I feel like this is an event that maybe we can get a little more down in the weeds, if you will, to help you understand SDRP 2. We value you all in helping us spread the message or the word, if you will, and to help us implement this program and get it out to the producers that have been waiting, some of them since 23 and 24, obviously. These producers are waiting for this aid and much anticipated. And I appreciate you all taking time to learn more about the program. I also need to mention our amazing team we have here at the Farm Service Agency. We actually worked through government shutdown, many of them did, in trying to roll out this program, which we did. Pretty much as soon as the government shutdown was over, we rolled out the program. We did training last week with all of our county offices and employees, and we have rolled this out as quickly as possible. And I just want to say thank you to them. They've done an amazing job. I would also mention that this program is maybe a bit complicated because of all the commodities and losses that we're trying to cover. I would ask that you be patient when you go out and speak to our employees in the county offices. They're doing the best they can, and they are learning, as we all are, in the whole process of getting this program implemented. So with that, I think I'm going to close, and I'm going to kick it to Kathy Sayer, who will get the show rolling. So Kathy, you're up.
Thanks, Bill. Good morning, everyone. We're excited to bring you the finer details of the SDRP Stage 2 program. I know that most of you were in a stakeholder briefing probably last week that had the high-level details. We'll go a little bit deeper today, but obviously with a 1-hour time frame, we're not going to get to go into all of the weeds. So your county office contacts are going to be key in understanding this program. As Bill said, this is a very large program. It can be a little overwhelming when you look at it as a whole, but once you dissect it down and understand the concept behind the SDRP Stage 2 program, you really can simplify it to your operation and see that it's honestly going to be simpler than what a WIP Plus program, and in a lot of cases, even simpler than the ERP Phase 2 and Track 2 models. We did transfer over from or transition from a revenue-based with those Stage 2, or I'm sorry, not Stage 2, Track 2 and Phase 2 under ERP to what we're doing under SDRP Stage 2, which is a more production-based, yield-based individual crop like under WIP Plus, to be more consistent and pay, Stage 2 losses more similar to our Stage 1. We're going to go over just an overview, and then we will jump into the program details. And before we get started, I forgot to even introduce myself. I'm Kathy Sayers. I'm the Division Director for the Safety Net Division, which is under the purview of Farm Programs under Jamie. And we and the Safety Net Division develop all of the programs that are disaster related, whether that's crop or livestock, ARC PLC, all of your common programs. So basically anything that's not price support and conservation. And today, our section head and myself will be talking about the SDRP Stage 2 program. So to get started, we're going to go over just an overview and some of the timelines of the SDRP Stage 2 program. As you know, this program was authorized under the American Relief Act that was signed in December of 2024. Overall, there was $30.78 billion in disaster assistance funding, which that was, parsed out through multiple programs. $16.09 billion was allocated for SDRP, both stages. Some of the things we did have to minimize a lot of the things that we're covering today. So we're going to basically talk through some of the most important things for you to remember that are similar to Stage 1 or the same as Stage 1, but then also concentrate on the differences of Stage 2. Our block grant states, there are 4 states that have block grants that are offering a crop disaster program, and that's Connecticut, Hawaii, Maine, and Massachusetts. So SDRP is not available in those states. Those producers that have crop losses in those 4 states would need to work with their state departments of ag, who we are right now continuing to create those block grant agreements, and those should be signed within the next couple of months. There's other block grant states where we've received several questions from as well. We have 10 other states that we are working with block grants on, and those states are not offering a crop disaster program. So producers in those states, for instance, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, those states that have those other block grants, those producers are eligible for SDRP because they're covering losses that are outside of a crop disaster program. Linkage, the same linkage rules apply to SDRP Stage 2 as they did for Stage 1. Producers must purchase coverage at an equivalent of a 6,100 coverage level or higher. And the coverage level plus the price election has to equate to a 6,100 coverage level. Just a quick overview of the Stage 2 program. As we go through this, you're going to see that it is a large program, but as Chris goes through each part of the program, you can dissect it to your individual operation and see that it's most likely either even simpler than programs in the past. So insured crops, this program is going to cover crops with shallow losses, those non-indemnified losses. We're going to cover APH and yield-based plans, area plans, dollar plans and other revenue, value loss, and trees, bushes, and trees and vines. So how we have dissected this program is based on the type of coverage a producer purchases, as well as the type of crop, which is why you see those categories here, the APH yield-based, the area, dollar plan, value loss, and so on. And that's because there's certain data elements that are available under certain types of plans of insurance that are not available under others. So we had to dissect those into different types of losses, and you will see what's going to be pre-filled on your application based on the type of coverage or the type of crop that you have covered. Under NAP, we also will have yield-based and value loss crops. It's separated into those two sections, but also under NAP, it's going to be separated into those non-indemnified losses that have either an approved application for payment already processed that had just previously resulted in a $0 payment, or those without an application for payment that will require some additional processing or additional data in most cases. We also, in stage 2, will cover uninsured crops, those producers that did not purchase coverage, and those are separated into yield-based, value loss, and then trees, bushes, and vines. At the very end, there will be a Puerto Rico edition, but we're not going to get into that today. I don't think that there's probably Puerto Rico participation today. One of the biggest things about stage 2 is the addition of our quality loss. If you will remember in years past, whether that's WIP or ERP, quality was most of the time a separate process or part of that revenue-based model. Under SDRP, it's separated into two different things, which is stage 1, which is going to be a future release because it's going to take additional processing and additional data. So that's going to be later on. And then our stage 2, there's a quality adjustment opportunity for yield-based crops, and then insured dollar plans and other revenue. And we will go into quality more in detail as we go through the presentation. Sign up began yesterday, and the application is an FSA 504 application. Producers will need to work with their county offices in filing. The deadline is going to be the same for both stage 1 and stage 2. It's April the 30th of 2026. And then if you will remember, all of the eligibility documentation and documents that are required for payment eligibility in the regulation, it always stipulates that it's 1 year after the end of enrollment. So that will be April 30th of 2027. There are going to be some requirements for whether that's production or inventory or quality. Some of those are required at the time of application, but it's not required for every single loss because we are utilizing a lot of data from RMA and FSA that's already on file. And as Chris goes through each section in detail, you'll understand more of when that is required and when it's not. Of course, the county committees can always request additional documentation to substantiate the loss, and producers would have 60 days from the date of that request to provide that documentation. So the schedule, because the program, as we've said, is a large program, there's different dates when things are going to become available. Yesterday, again, beginning of sign up, that's all insured, all NAP covered, and uninsured crops are part of the application process and can be, those producers can apply now. In early December, we are adding the insured and uninsured trees, bushes, and vines part of the application. And so those producers with those types of policies can come in at that time. And then in early 2026, we are adding the stage 1 quality component. So those producers that had indemnified losses that were included in the universe of SDRP stage 1, those producers would be able to come in at that point, which will be a separate announcement for stage 1 quality and apply for their quality losses at that time, if they have quality losses. After that, Puerto Rico will be added in release 4, which will be early 2026 as well. We do have a lot of resources, so all of the things that we can't get to or things that you have questions about, we have a pretty robust SDRP producer-facing website with a lot of toolkit items on there. So this is the website. Cassie's going to also put it in our chat today, so you'll have that to go to the website, and you have the fact sheet. There's frequently asked questions. That at a glance card that is the producer checklist. We highly recommend that you go and look at that at a glance checklist to see what you could do to prepare for your appointment with the county office and, be ready to go in and apply, and so you won't have to do so many visits to the county office. Our program provisions were published via the Federal Register last week. Now, the Federal Register, because of the government shutdown, is a little bit behind in combining all of those. So the regulation was published, but as far as putting it all together in the 7 CFR 760 subpart V, that is still in process. So if you go and you can't see it all combined together, that's the reason they're still a little behind, but they are catching up. We also have our policy handbook, which is our Handbook 1 SDRP policy. We had to release that in draft last week to county offices because, again, everything's being caught up, but that should be publicly posted at the beginning of next week. So all of you guys should be able to have access next week. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Vasquez, our section head for the disaster assistance section. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. All right, let's go ahead and jump right into this program. So the stage 2 application process, as Kathy indicated, it's broken down and contains 15 separate parts. And so we're going to go through each of those parts and briefly kind of talk about what's important, what do you need when you come in, what's going to look like for the applicants on that form, and how are they going to receive it. Now, the application is broken into the 15 parts, but the only thing that's going to print out on the application is what is specific to that producer. So, for instance, if a producer only has things that we bucketed as an APH yield, but they don't have anything in NAP, they're not going to see the NAP parts of the application. It will only be the APH yield that's going to populate on there for them. So there are a lot of parts to the application, but we're working to try to simplify it and not overwhelm the producers with what they're going to see there. So this is important as well. The producers will have to work with their county offices to complete the forms. We have to do it all through our system because we are leveraging data from various sources, from crop insurance, FSA has through various systems. We cannot take any manual applications. Now, one thing that really to push on for any of your producers that if they don't have federal crop insurance, or if they aren't NAP and they're coming in as uninsured producers, the first thing we got to make sure they do is getting established with FSA if they haven't already done so. So getting those records set up, and then starting with an acreage report. After we get the acreage report on file, that's where everything's going to start from those uninsured, and then it can start going into the application. So they'll really need to make sure they're following those 2 steps first, because if they come in and just go straight to an application, the application is not going to know what needs to be pulled in. And so it's going to be driven really off of that FSA acreage report. So we're going to jump in right now straight into quality losses, because it's a new kind of offset of the program. So just kind of explain what quality is, how it works within the program, and then we will jump into the individual parts of the application and how quality in some cases applies, or in some cases it does not apply as well. So we have the quality assistance, as Kathy indicated. We're administering it through stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 1, that's in the later release sometime early next year. But that's going to be for APH or yield-based crops and NAP yield-based crops only. Now we'll jump into later at that time kind of the intricacies of this program and why it's limited to those areas. But for stage 2, quality loss is going to apply to all of the parts when a producer is turning in production. So that's federal crop insurance, NAP, or uninsured. It doesn't apply to the tree, bush, and vine. It doesn't apply to value loss because those are not a production-based calculations. So it's production is going to be, and what we do is we're going to do a subset calculation of the quality that comes up with essentially a percent, and we reduce the production to count by that percent of that quality loss. So we're going to talk about that some more here as we go through. Now, the eligible crops are going to be like we talked about, those production-based. So that's your insured APH and yield-based crops, your insured dollar crops and other revenue, the NAP yield-based crops, your uninsured yield-based crops, and then the insured crops in Puerto Rico. Now, things that are ineligible for quality loss are crops insured under an area plan. So that's your area plans are your annual forage, your PRF, apiculture. Those are area-based plans. So they're not based on an individual producer's level of production. It's based on what's going on in that particular area. So those do not have the option for a quality reduction. Crops, additionally, crops where quality has already been compensated under stage one. So under crop insurance and even some NAP, there is some quality that's already been compensated there. So any of those qualities that's not going to be counted here in stage two. Crops where production was already reduced for quality under NAP. So under the NAP side, we already have provisions that allow for quality losses for all forage using RFV. Now, if a producer was already compensated for those quality losses under NAP, then there will not be an additional quality loss under the SDRP side because of the way they're calculated. They're calculated the same way. So that is a part when quality would not apply for the forage producers. Then we just have some of the crops that breaks out into maple sap, honey, tree bushes and vines, crops that were destroyed, prevented from planting, and then the value loss crops. So the quality loss percentage, and what you'll see when we get into this application, it's going to be down to a singular percentage that is going to be based on really, we're going to have a fork in the road, and you're going one of two ways. For forage crops and all other crops, all crops other than forage. So for forage crops, it's going to be based on a loss in nutritional value. And for all crops other than forage, it's going to be for a reduction in total value of that crop at the with the physical condition at the essentially the point of sale. So those are what we're going to, where we split them off. And then we have a couple subsets that we'll kind of touch upon as well. So quality reduction for all crops except forage, we're using a decrease in value based on discounts. This is similar, if you all remember back to QLA, the QLA program we administered, I think for losses in 18 and 19. So this is similar in QLA, used a same premise with a reduction in the value. How QLA calculate was a little different, and also QLA allowed for, if a producer didn't have verifiable records, to be able to come in and have essentially a county average loss. This program does not allow for that. All producers that are going to apply for quality, whether it be on the nutritional side with the forage or all other crops, are going to be required to have verifiable evidence of that. And we'll talk more, about what that evidence might look like. But for the forage, they have to have a test that shows what that factor was. And then for all the other crops, they're going to have showing, because for example, wheat, they go in at the elevator, what are those discounts that were applied? So they'll have to have evidence there. But basically it comes down to, we're going to take that production that was impacted by quality, and it's going to be weighted against all their production. So, and we have some calculators that we're developing out there. We've actually two are going live yesterday on the forage and all other crops, where the producer can sit down and put their inputs in. It'll help them, and it will calculate for them what's going to be this 1% that they're going to put on that singular line item on that application. So the quality reduction for the all other crops for the forage, it's going to be that nutritional value, and different from QLA. QLA established, have the producer turn in loss year and then 3 prior years, and kind of establishing essentially what's their average. This program is going to do a little different. There will be levels that are going to be established by FSA. And then if state committees look at those levels and say, well, they're not really representative, or we want to use a different kind of test instead of, for instance, they don't want to use TDN, or they want to use a different level with RFV, they can make those recommendations to the FSA national office. and we can take a look at them and prove them. So it's because we recognize that, especially in different areas on forage, you can have different what's really standard for what they're trying to, what they're selling in that area. So we'll have that ability. So the application process, stage 2, the initial deployment, part of the application process, the quality is already baked in. It's part of the application process. And so we talked about this. It's weight based, and it's going to be on the affected production. So price before, price expected, actual price. You basically divide between the two, figure out what the percent loss is, apply that towards the impacted production, and then apply that across the weight for the total production. Now, stage 1 is going to be a separate enrollment process. Like we said, it's going to be early in 2026. They're going to calculate the quality loss the same way. So it's going to be the exact same methodology. They're going to turn in the same records. They're going to be able to use the same calculators to determine what that quality loss is. It's going to be a little different for like on the RMA side. We were going to take and look at where did RMA already account for quality loss, and then what are there any quality factors that RMA may have missed, or maybe RMA had a loss threshold that this program does not have, and that's where stage 1 will pick up for a difference in those quality losses. So, but we'll jump more into that when we get there in January. But that's the premise behind the stage 1. Now, we are also going to have some exceptions to quality grading criteria. So if you all remember back to QLA, there were some exceptions that were built in, and that's just because of the way the crops are marketed. So upland cotton had a specific one. It was based on bales. That is a separate calculator. We are working on it. We're working on, that's going to be probably our next one that we're going to get rolled out. We'll have the same. So these are all exceptions that were already built in for QLA, and we're pulling them over. Small grains sold as feed, pulse crops sold as feed, sugarcane, and peanuts. Now, upland cotton, sugarcane, and peanuts are all going to have their own individual calculators. And so, like I said, we're in the process of getting those worked out right now. So I'll let you know, like I said, cotton's going to be next, and then probably peanuts after that, and then probably sugarcane would be last. That's just the process that we have, and we're working through getting those calculators built out. But we'll get those out there as quickly as possible. So, as I indicated, the quality loss calculators are available. They're on our public site. So go through this link, you'll be able to navigate and see what those calculators are. I encourage you to go take a look at them. Of course, the only two that are out there right now are the forage and all other crops. And as we build out these other additional calculators, they will be placed also as well on this site. So now I'm going to jump into really kind of going through the application, how we've broken it down, and kind of like a high level of what to expect in each of these areas. So the first off, when you're looking at your application, it's going to be the insured crops. So it's going to be parts C through G are going to be these insured crops. Part C is the APH and yield-based plans. Now, I'll show you these here to help you a little in the presentation. Now, we bucketed these plans based on the data that we had, the data that RMA could provide to us, and how we could utilize that data. So you may see some plans that we bucketed under yield-based that you maybe traditionally wouldn't think of as a yield-based plan, but it's because of the data that we were able to collect from crop insurance and how we can essentially, in a lot of cases, mimic how they were indemnified. So we have those situations where we can use that same calculation or very similar in some cases, so to pay for that extra SDRP payment on stage 2, which is really similar to what was done on stage 1. Area-based plans. So those are your PRFs, annual forage, apiculture. So those are ones we bucket in there. Those are your area plans. Then your dollar and other revenue. Largely, I think mostly probably specialty crops, but those are going to be ones where the data was really not something that we could heavily lean on. And so FSA was having to do a calculation, and that's where we kind of see a difference between how those crops would have been calculated under stage 1 and how we're handling them under stage 2. As far as value loss, probably if you were looking at those, you would say that those are $1 or other revenue plan, but because those are on crops that don't lend themselves to a production calculation, and so that we can use them how FSA calculates those type, we have pushed them into a value loss scenario. Same thing for trees and vines. Trees and vines, you probably look at those and say, well, that's $1 plan. It's really, but for how we are handling trees and vines, we're pulling those over, and we have a unique calculation for them. So we bucket them separately there. So the first up we're going to go talk about is the insured APH plans. So here's a list of those plans. It's the, I won't read these off to you, but these are the ones that we have bucketed in the APH yield. So you can see right off the bat, O2 revenue protection. I know if, I'm looking at that, I'm like, well, that's not really yield-based plan, but it's there because of how we can collect that data. So these are in part C of the application. And these are the ones that I would think really apply to a lot of you all on this call. You'll have a lot in this area. And these are going to be ones where you can look that the information that's highlighted in yellow, that's what we're collecting over from crop insurance. So the only thing, this up here, 11 through 18 across the top, is really what you've seen on stage 1. So we're getting the physical state county, the crop unit number, the primary policyholder, and the SBI. The producer just has to come through and indicate what % share, if they're giving, and if there's any ownership share that goes to that SBI, how they want to break that payment out, the agreement to purchase their crop insurance. So that's that linkage agreement, that 6100 that Kathy indicated. And then we have our disaster event, where that's where you're going to come in. The producer has to indicate that it's one of those qualifying events. So if it's a drought, it has to be a qualifying drought, right? That's going to be a D2 or higher for, I believe it's 8 weeks, or a D3 or greater. So if they were in a D2, but it didn't meet that qualifying, they means they wouldn't have a disaster event. But also keep in mind that when they're applying for these events, it's a loss that's in whole or in part. So if only part of that unit had a loss due to, for example, heat, that's a qualifying event. The whole unit is in. We're not bifurcating a unit down based on a qualifying event. So if they can have part of it come in, that's fine. And another thing to keep in mind as well is they do not have to and we don't expect it to, that the way that if they were indemnified, or maybe they applied for crop insurance, in this case they weren't indemnified, so they're in stage 2, but they may have applied for an event and it was a shallow loss, an indemnity didn't trigger, the losses don't have to match up. In a lot of cases, they may not match up at all. So they may have reported that they had an event was hail, for example, with crop insurance, but then you come over to hail's not a qualifying event. So they have to look and see, okay, was there something else that happened that maybe I didn't report to crop insurance that impacted the crop? So that's then 17. And then really where the difference starts to come in here is this bottom part, which is items 19 through 27. So these are being sent over to FSA, and that item number 22, that's the SDRP liability. So that is going to be where you're going to take the acres times the yield times the price times that SDRP factor. So that SDRP factor is specific. It correlates to whatever their coverage level was. So if their coverage level, I believe it was, I think if they had 65%, I believe the SDRP factor is 87.5 that comes in, but it's directly a correlation to what their coverage level was. So that's going to come over from RMA. If the producer had turned in any production to RMA, possibly for yield purposes, they're going to, number 23 is going to come into them over there as well. So if a producer looks at this application and they don't question anything and they're good with the production, they can sign off on it and they don't need to do anything else. Now, if the production that came in because it was turned in for yield purposes, it may be over, estimating what their production was. That's where item 24 comes in. We're giving the producers the option that if they don't, the production in 23 is really not representative of their loss, and they need to change that production, That's where they can come in, they can turn in acceptable records to FSA to support what that loss is, so they can put a number in 24, and we're going to use the item that they, based on the production records they turn in for 24. Now, 25 is what we just talked about with that quality loss. That's where they're going to come in for 25 and enter in a single percent. So they'll go through those calculators, they'll come up, and it was, let's just say, a 5% loss. And it's going to take the production, essentially 5% of that production is going to come off of the production to count as part of the calculation. And then 26 and 27, that's just in the case where when FSA is reviewing those records, if producer calculated that quality loss incorrectly, or production records that were turned in show a different number than what was certified, it allows FSA to go through and override that number. So the payment calculation. So what we have a payment calculation, this is on the APH, and the premise of all of these calculations is the same. It is, what did you expect and what did you get? And that expectation, we're going to look at, take into account what was your coverage level. So we're going to turn that into an SDRP factor, and taking off essentially what did you get? Your production times the price. So just to walk you through what the calculation is, we're taking a look at that SDRP liability minus the production times that quality loss times the price. That's how we're going to determine it, what is essentially the left-hand side of the calculation. Now, we are also taking into account potential insured indemnity. And same thing with NAP. And so this program will only compensate for the difference between the coverage level and the SDRP factor. So if the producer had 65-100 coverage with crop insurance, this program, even though they may not have been indemnified at that because they had a shallow loss, it's only going to be paying for the losses in between the 65 and their coverage level. So 65 and 87.5% in that case. Now, if they had a shallow loss, it doesn't impact them. It really is to make sure that the program is not covering for parts that crop insurance would have covered. But if in the cases of a shallow loss, it doesn't change their calculation. It doesn't impact them at all because crop insurance never would have paid. So there was no potential payment was there. But they will see that. Now, NAP is going to work the same way. It's just the SDRP factors are a little bit different between coverage level and SDRP factor. And then when you get into uninsured, it calculates a little bit different as well. But this is going to take into account any potential SDRP, potential insured payment. And then if the difference between that calculated loss and the SDRP payment, if it's a positive number, then we're going to add back in the premiums and fees for that unit. And then, of course, we're applying the same 35% payment factor that was used in stage one. Now, the area-based plans. These are the ones largely worked how they did under stage one. It's a breakdown. Here's a breakdown of what these plans are. Same ones we include in stage one. Now, the difference between largely here, what we from stage one to stage two, is our ability to split out this loss. So, for instance, under annual forage, if they included any grazing acres, we had to deny those under stage one. Now we have the ability, we're going to collect, again, the pre-fill is what crop insurance is going to send over to us. So they're going to tell us what the insured acres are. We're going to collect a 578 from the producer, and they will be able to tell us the percent of eligible acres based on what they reported to FSA and what they insured. So they can split that payment out to split out eligible acres of between annual forage that had perhaps some grazing acres, that had 50-50 grazing, we can put 50% in here. I mean, this is an oversimplification of it, and pay them at 50%. So it allows for a bifurcation of that SDRP payment. So it's going to be very similar to how crop insurance. So essentially, crop insurance is going to recalculate that indemnity with a higher coverage level. Either they weren't indemnified, including stage one, or they were in stage one and they were denied because of the split or because they had ineligible acres or crops in there. So we're including those in here. But you're going to take the payment times the producer certified acres times that payment factor. Now, how are we going to split it? What's the producer going to do? And so if the eligible acres on the 578 is equal to or greater than the RMA acres, then the producer can certify 100% is eligible. If the eligible acres on the 578 is less than the RMA insured acres, the producer will determine the percent difference between the eligible insured on the 578 compared to the RMA insured acres on the application. Now, there's a whole bunch of different scenarios that you could probably go through in examples here. We've just included one that we've pulled over, and it's probably the more popular one here, but the producer has an annual forage policy that was denied under stage 1 because the producer had grazing acres on their 578, which is the acreage report. The FSA 578 has 100 acres certified to forage, 50 acres certified to grazing, and 50 acres certified to grain. Now, RMA is insured acres on that item number 36 shows 100 acres. The 50 acres of grazing, of course, are ineligible. So the producer would add the 100 acres of forage and the 50 acres of grain. So they have 150 acres that are eligible. And since the 150 acres on the acreage report, the 578 is greater than what they insured, the producer can certify that they had 100% eligible acres in item 37 on the 504. Now, I know there's a whole bunch of other scenarios, and I would just encourage, if they have different ones, just to work with their counties on that area-based plan, because there's probably things that we haven't thought about. I have no doubt about that. So work with their counties on those, and we'll, if anything comes up, we'll be sure to work with the counties on getting those answers to you. Now, this next one is the insured dollar plans and other revenue. So these are the ones right here, your pecan revenue, your actual revenue history, some of these other plans in here. And these are the ones where we talked about that we couldn't really leverage the crop insurance data, so everything is being redone by FSA. Same premise on the calculation. What did you expect and what did you get? Now, the expectation here is based on the producer's going to turn in a complete acreage report with FSA. We're going to apply a yield. We're going to give them the county expected yield in this case, and we're going to use a price that's on that FSA has already established. So, but same premise, we're going to take into account what potentially could have already been received from insurance. And if that number is greater, if the calculated loss minus that insured payment is greater than 0, add back in the premiums and fees, and then applying that 35% factor. So when you look at this application, you're going to see items going to be pre-filled, all here in yellow. And then these right here are going to be a combination in yellow as well off of acreage report. Really, it's really what we're pulling from the acreage report. And then producers are going to have to turn in production, turn in quality loss. So it's the same theme with these, especially production-based crops. Producers are going to have to, may not have, well, in some cases they have to turn in production. They may not have to in others if they want to accept it, but producer could turn in production records and turn in quality loss records as well. So NAP covered crops. So NAP is broken down into 4 areas. NAP we have the value loss crops and we have our yield-based crops. And so that's parts H through K. They're broken down as, did they have an approved application or did they not have an application? If they had an approved application, that means that it was approved, but it calculated $0. And so it wasn't included in stage 1. Stage 1, they had to have a payment that calculated greater than 0 to be included. Now we're going to be able to capture those that maybe had an application, calculated no dollars. We're going to pull those over. And then as well as the ones on the NAP side that did not have an application for payment on file, or maybe they had one, it got disapproved. So those are what we're going to capture here on parts J through K. Now, the NAP crops with an approved application for payment, it's going to largely look similar to what was already what we've looked at for that dollar-based one. The difference is when you look here on what's pulled over in yellow, production is already counted. That's because we've already paid on it was already included on the application for payment. It's being pulled over. So the only thing that we're doing is we're building in the ability for if the producer had an additional quality loss that maybe NAP didn't already account for, that they can now account for that quality loss on here on stage 2. It's going to follow the same basic premise of the calculated loss. It's the SDRP liability minus the production. Now you'll notice here it doesn't take into account any NAP and a potential NAP payment. That's because it doesn't need to, because it's a shallow loss. Your APH, if you go back to your insured crops, it would work. It's really working the same way. It skips that step, but since they were already at 0, that means that we know they didn't suffer a loss within their NAP coverage level. So this is only going to indemnify for the difference between coverage level and SDRP factor. Same thing, if the calculated loss is greater than 0, premiums and fees get added back in times that 35% payment factor. Now we're going to go into yield-based crops without an application for payment. Now these are ones where we don't have production. So we'll utilize the documentation that we already have on file where we can. Producer will turn in production records to us, and same idea, turn in production, quality loss, and the documentation has to be acceptable. Same basic idea. Calculation, now this one is different because they did not have an application for payment under NAP. It goes back and is taking into account a potential NAP payment. But you take that calculated loss minus that potential NAP payment. If it's greater than 0, you're going to add back in those premiums and fees and then multiply that times that payment factor. Now, we skipped the value loss. I didn't go over those because those really don't apply to the crops you're in. But so now we'll jump straight into the uninsured APH or yield-based crops. And these are really going to look very similar to what you've already seen. This is what I talked about before. A producer is going to come in, get established with FSA if they haven't already done so. They are going to file an FSA 578. And once they do that, then this application will be generated based on what that 578 says. And so same idea as we've already talked about. Of course, producer is going to turn in production. They'll have an option for a quality loss percent. And really, it's the same calculation we've talked about. Now, the difference is that if they're uninsured, the SDRP factor is 70%. That is a stagnant number. The legislation indicates that that factor cannot exceed 70%. So it's been established at the highest level of 70% for those uninsured. Now, uninsured is different than uncoverable. If RMA determines that acres are uncoverable, they cannot move those to uninsured. And I'm sure that's going to cause a lot of questions, and we'll work through those because it is a very confusing topic. But largely, let's just say RMA determined acres are in a low area that floods frequently. We're not going to cover those acres. Those acres are just excluded from SDRP. They can't pull those acres over to uninsured. But if they have acres in one county and acres in another county, but they only choose to take coverage out in county A, county B acres can now be covered under the uninsured. And so they can come in and report those acres. Now, I know I threw a lot at you and I was talking really quickly. I was trying to watch the clock and not run over, but that gets us through the end of the presentation. And I know we wanted to push it over and give Shalala a chance to talk about her program. So I will kick it back to, not sure, Jamie or.
Thank you, Chris. So as we said at the beginning of the call, make sure that you enter any questions that you have in the chat. And if we don't have time today to answer those, we will make sure that the Q&A document on the website is updated. And so Shalay is now going to talk about the on-farm storage program. Shalay?
Good morning. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I'm Shalay Watson. I'm in the Price Support Division, and I'm the Program Manager for the On-Farm Stored Commodity Loss Program. And I have a few slides. This is a very high overview. What I would like to do, let me copy and paste this link and put it in the chat for you. This is our website where you can find more information about the on-farm stored commodity loss program. Additionally, we have a Q&A posted on this site where if you ask questions in this chat and I'm not able to cover them, they'll definitely be posted to this site. This is a producer-facing website, so you can gain more information. Like I said, this is a very high level, so there will be additional information that you can glean from this website. Let me just go ahead and share my slides real fast. Okay. So this program is also under the same legislation. It's the Disaster Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2025. And this program provides assistance to producers who suffered losses of eligible commodities while those commodities were in on-farm storage structures that were damaged due to a qualifying disaster event that occurred in calendar year 2023 or 2024. $5 million has been allotted to this program, and I'm going to talk a little bit about proration later on in this presentation. But this program is similar to the on-farm storage loss program that covered losses for weather or disaster events in calendar years 2018 and 2019. The commodity must have been stored in a storage structure that was damaged or destroyed as a result of a disaster event. I have a list of those disaster events on the upcoming slide. And this structure must have been located on the farm and used for the storage of that eligible commodity that was produced and stored on farm. And the structure should have been able to store that commodity until it was marketed, delivered, or used for private purposes on the farm. And the commodity must have been grown by the applicant. The disaster events that are eligible under this program include wildfires, hurricanes, floods, derechos, excessive heat, tornadoes, winter storms, freeze, including a polar vortex, smoke exposure, and qualifying drought. And then I just wanted to share our eligible commodities: wheat, feed grains, oil seeds, rice, seed cotton, hay, and then pulse crops. So I'll give you a chance to take a look at this slide. And again, if I do want to mention, if producers have particular questions, if our shared clients or customers have particular questions, I encourage them to visit their local service center so they can ask their specific questions and get more information about this program. Ineligible conditions for this program include commodities that are stored in commercial storage structures, such as warehouses. If the commodity is wrapped in plastic, so like hay wrapped in plastic and then just left in the field, uncovered by another storage structure, that's not eligible for this program. Also, losses that are related to excessive moisture do not qualify for this program because that's a condition that should have happened during storage, like as far as drying the commodity to prepare for storage, but that's not a part of this program. And then also quality losses are not included in this program because those are also pre-harvest conditions or due to pre-harvest conditions. And then real quickly, I want to touch on the payment rates. Our payment rates are based on the National Agricultural Statistics Service, so NASS, established national market year average prices. So the MYA prices are what we're using to calculate our payments. There's going to be one rate per commodity per loss year. So there's a rate for the commodities for for calendar year 2023. And then there's a rate for calendar year 2024. Our payment, the on-farm stored payment rate, will be 75% of the NASS MYA price. So that means that the producer will absorb 25% of the loss, and that's similar to other programs we have, other disaster programs. We have the same percentage reduction. Additionally, I touched on $5 million is what's allotted to this program. We will prorate the payments as necessary to if our applications exceed what the total amount of funding is available, we will do some kind of proration to factor the payments. And I just wanted to share about the payment limitation and the calculation for the payment. This is a two-tiered payment limitation. So if you're familiar with other programs, typically our payment limitation would be $125,000. But if the applicant's average adjusted gross farm income exceeds 75% of their adjusted gross income, then they're eligible to receive a $250,000 payment limitation. But I would encourage producers to contact their local service center and make sure they complete the forms. There's additional documentation they must provide and certifications they must provide in order to receive that increased payment limitation. And just our calculation for how we're coming up with the payments. The payment rate is going to be our factored MYA price. Our payment rate will be multiplied by the producer's share of the quantity while in storage. And then if the producers received any other compensation, maybe from insurance or a salvage buyer or any other program, we'll reduce that amount from what our calculated amount is. And then I mentioned before that we're expected to exceed the amount of funds we have. So we'll have an additional factor on top of those payments. And then just to close, just to the site that I posted in the chat, but if you have any questions, if you want to see our Q&A document that's updated, and if there's other questions pertaining to the program, you can visit this website and you'll be able to view up-to-date information about the program. So I kept mine very short. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And that's it for my portion, unless you have any questions for me. Thank you. Guess I want to turn it back over to Jamie.
Thank you, Shalay, for covering the on-farm stored commodity loss program in such a short space of time. I know we've had a robust agenda today as we unveiled the program details for two very important components of this final wave of supplemental disaster relief for America's farmers, ranchers, and growers. As previously discussed, we will continue to monitor the questions and answers that are submitted in the chat, and we will address those in writing, given that the discussion today went quite long. And once those are addressed in writing, they will be posted online on the FSA website that is also included in this chat. Additionally, this recording will be available online as well. With that, I believe we can go ahead and close out today's stakeholder call. Thank you all for supporting farmers and ranchers as we move forward through program implementation. Take care.